Welcome back to another video of my business escapades, my failures and successes. And this one is, I think it's much more of a failure than it is a success. And I don't think in like the negative view of failure, but certainly in the view that a business didn't come out of it. So you got to sort of picture this. If you've watched a few of the other videos, this is the really early 2000s. The dot-com boom and busts happened, and I think it's about 2004. I'm just back from London, and I need to make some money, man. I'm broke. Like, in your 20s, you're broke. I don't know. 2004, I might have been 24, maybe 25, maybe. Is that right? I think that's about right. But I've done some epic adventures, and I've spent a hell of a lot on my education. But now it's time to actually make some real money. And I'd seen these lights, these really large compact fluorescent lights. I've obviously started to see them, like the small ones, turn up at the hardware stores and things like that. But I'd actually gone to a store and seen these huge compact fluorescent light globes. And incandescent bulbs were the norm. Most people used incandescent. They might have used the fluoro, the big long tubes, or the circular version, or even just the small version. But there wasn't, compact fluoros are still pretty expensive. There was a lot of things that were sort of holding them back. There wasn't a massive incentive. Electricity wasn't horrendously expensive yet either. But when I saw these really big ones, and then I knew that metal halide bulbs, which are on the street lights, used about 400 watts. So each one of those used about 400 watts, and metal halide bulbs only last for a certain period of time. And then you run into these large compact fluoro bulbs that put out the same amount of light for about the quarter of the amount of power. And I was like, the numbers here add up. Now, this is about the time in my life where I bought this red book. It was a black and red book, and I think I still have one. It's currently in my storage unit because we're doing up the house. And this black and red book, what I'd started to do was write down every conceivable business idea that I could ever imagine and do the numbers on it. And it came with me everywhere. It had its own little briefcase thing with the sign over my shoulder. That book went out to me on the dance floor at 2 a.m. if I was having a party. It came to me with me to the toilet. It came to me to work. Everywhere I went, it went with a pen, and I just analysed business models. And I was desperate to see and practice getting very, very good at designing business models. And I think I remember where it came from. I may have read one of these business books and they said 9 out of 10 businesses failed. And I was like, right, well, I'm just going to have to start 10 then. If I want to be a successful businessman, I've got to accept that if I start 10, I'm going to have one success. And I was like, okay, well, and then maybe I should work out how to know whether it's going to be a success or failure ahead of time. And so I just bought this book and just started studying it. And it was surprising how quickly, early on there was these quite elaborate, plans, but as you got further down the line, it was significantly faster. So for instance, you've got a 400 watt metal halide bulb, the compact fluoros, let's say for instance, they're 100 or 120 watts, depending on the power output. I think the 120 watt one matched the 400 watt metal halide output. So you're talking about a bit over a quarter of the amount of power usage. What's the current cost per kilowatt hour of electricity? How much money are you saving? How many is in a normal street? How many streets are there in a suburb? How many suburbs are there in a city? How much money is the council going to save in the first year, say for instance, or what's the payback period? The numbers are quite small and very concise. And that was exciting. And I could just, when you did the numbers on this, it was insane. Now I was green, I hadn't built like an actually successful business at this point in time. But this was probably one of the better numbers that I'd come across. And so I was like, right, well, I've got about $2,300 saved. That's what I had. And I knew I couldn't do it on my own, or at least I didn't want to. And I had a mate of mine, and I was like, and he lived on the Gold Coast, and I was like, bro, do you want to do this? Like, I really want to do this. And he was a bit like, yeah. And I just assume when people say yes, that there are, yeah, like a really, I'm into it, yeah. He wasn't that way inclined. I think many years later, he told me he was just concerned he was going to disappoint me. And so I was like, okay, well, so I started this thing, and I was like, right, I'm going to order these things from China. I'm going to, get all the bits and pieces done. So I started to sort of collect what I thought was required to build a business. I think I went and, I know I went and bought a company and set that up and looked at how you construct shares. I looked at like contracts, how I would sell. I even went down to some stores and looked at, how could I sell them to them? Where did they buy them from? Spent, quite a bit of money on all of that stuff. And then $2,300 doesn't go a long way. It was a hell of a lot more money 20 years ago than it is now. And I put my first order in China, and it never turned up. Can't even remember now where I ordered it, but it was some online store, some weird place. I think I ended up buying one large compact fluoro. Actually, I know I did. Maybe, no, two. I bought two. Then I went to sell them, and everyone's like, where's all the other stuff? And I didn't know about things like you had to get, electricity compliance, and you had to do this, and there was all this other stuff that went on. I didn't know that stuff, and I didn't have enough money to do that stuff, and I probably just didn't realize how much effort it was going to take to build a company. That staying power, when you get told no, okay, then how? And I think when my friends sort of just didn't contribute a lot, I wasn't quite sure what the hell that meant. And so there was just this, it was probably the messiest business I'd ever operated before, because everything else was generally, pretty well oiled. But this thing was the first thing I'd ever tried to start from nothing, with no one else around, except the birds, the plant selling. But that was sort of a bit easy. You put an ad in the paper and sell it. This was sort of like the first viable company business. And it failed. It didn't even look like it was going to succeed. It splattered. And I really had no idea how. I was so green because the numbers looked fantastic. But I didn't know that business, and this was a little bit later on, I think I read the E-Myth around this time. I think maybe even my mum might have even recommended it, purely because I did not get that the product isn't the business. There's a huge portion of the business that isn't the product part. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that, all that stuff. But at least at this point in time, having lost my life savings, and had my tail between my legs, and my business partner and I were not in a business partnership anymore. I had a company, which I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do accounts, even though I'd studied accounting at university. I didn't have an accounting program. Like, there was just all this stuff that I knew I didn't have, and I'd have missed out on. And there was stuff that so it was an incredible learning experience. And I had a couple of things that I got out of it. So I got to keep the company. I got to keep the fluorescent light bulbs, which I think in the end, I turned them into, you could also use them to grow like hydroponic plants. So I think I sold them to a guy online or something like that, or on Gumtree or Trading Post or whatever, who was, I don't know what he was doing with them, but he wanted them for hydroponics. So I was like, oh, whatever. So I think I got some money back from that. And I'm pretty sure I went out and had a party and drowned my sorrows. And that was probably looking at it now, like just describing it to you now, it was probably a really important moment to fail. Purely because the next business that I created, so let's just say 2003, 2004, I reckon it was more likely 2004. The next business I created, and I'll talk about that in another video at a later date. You'll come back later and watch it. Or it could be up now, I don't know, depending on where you're watching it. I haven't recorded it yet. That was a significantly bigger business because I knew how to do the numbers, and I knew all the things, all the administrative things that I needed to do. And I knew what I needed to do from a perspective of finding customers who really wanted to buy a product, as opposed to, hey, I've got this fantastic new product, you should buy it. But going to a council and telling them that's hard. It's not easy. So I had to learn those things to realize it was just difficult to get in front of government and say, hey, look, you're going to save a bunch of money. You should put these globes in. There was capital costs involved in that I wasn't, I guess, being responsible for, or I wasn't aware of. So heaps and heaps and heaps of learning lessons that really had to let me see that, like, there's all these pieces that you need in a business, and they're not like a jigsaw puzzle. They're more like a spider's web, but it's fluid. It's moving. You know, these pieces are continuously being reinvented so that they fit correctly as the business expands and evolves. And I just didn't have any clue about what those things were until I did this business and then failed and lost all of my money. And I'm pretty sure after this, I went and got my first job. I think that might be when I got my first job. I had the money and failed in such a short period of time. And I think I was still living at home with my parents and hanging out with my mates and couch surfing and whatever else you do when you're 20. Yeah, I'm pretty sure pretty much straight after this I had to get a job because I had no money. But I'll probably talk about that. I may talk about that in another video, but this is about business. So hopefully you got something from that. Hopefully you're getting from these videos that it's the failures that you learn a hell of a lot more than the successes. With a success, you're just making money, you know, and it's a success. It's fantastic. It's phenomenal, and you are learning things, but there isn't as much of a need to learn because you're already on a winner. When you have a failure, now it's like, okay, well, I had a failure. Now what? And that, you start to look at, what did I miss? You know, how much money what do I have needed to make this happen? You know, how did my marketing go? Did I know how to do accounting? Is Excel a good program for accounting? You know, there's all these questions that you come out with that are incredible. And so I guess one of the things that I'd like to leave you with from these videos, or I'd like you to be left with, is that, you know, if you do want to be a business person, it's super important to start quickly, and if you need to fail. It's not smart to try to find the perfect business, because I really did think this was a sensational business. The numbers were just sensational. But you don't know what you don't know until you discover it, and in that moment you realize you've either got the resources to get over it, or the nous or the brains or whatever, or you don't. And I, in this business, just didn't have that. So now I had a list of things that I didn't know how to get over, and now I could work on that huge list. And I wouldn't have, for $2,300 was a bargain. It was way cheaper than any education that I was ever going to go and purchase at a university or a training organisation. I was never going to get this level of training for $2,300. So hopefully you got something from that. Thanks for watching. If you want to work with me, you know, all the links will be down the bottom. What I'm looking for is people who want to do cool stuff, people who want me to contribute what I know to the success of their business. I've worked in a plethora of industries, and I love people, I love business, and I love making a difference, and I'm up for doing awesome stuff with awesome people. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I might hear from you. You know, I might message me or call me or contact me and say, hey, look, I want some coaching. It's through my business tech house. I want to work with you. I want you to come and provide me some guidance. I even surprise myself at some of the stuff that I've done. So yeah, I want to surprise you. Thanks for watching.